I thought that this video was a great example of how cognitive dissonance caused by biblical literalism is, in my opinion, the root of many conspiracy theories. We'll see the moment this way of thinking takes the presenter on a wild ride into irrational thinking in order to bend reality to fit it with our existing view formed by the Bible. Please join me as we explore this topic.
1,000 years have passed since Christ's second advent. The scorched earth still bears the scars of sin. Soon, the land will be cleansed with fire, and the whole earth will be made new forever.
Well, there's already contradiction there. So the scorched earth will be cleansed with fire. Why? It's already scorched. This sounds to me like an ancient people's recognition of the fact that after a fire there's a lot of seeds germinating, bringing new life to that area, while at the same time they knew nothing about the natural mechanisms that make that happen.
But now, the heavenly city, the New Jerusalem, comes down out of heaven.
But now, as in before the earth is made anew, will the fire cleansing start at the borders of the heavenly city and radiate outwards? Or is it protected from the fire somehow? God could have just brought it down when he had already cleaned up his previous mess.
With the glory of God and his Son, surrounded by thousands upon thousands of angels, the golden four-square city lands upon the Mount of Olives.
More contradictions. You said earlier that the city would be landing on a scorched earth with only the scars of sin remaining. How does a Mount of Olives remain? Is a Mount of Olives a scar of sin? Should we refrain from eating olives? I think they taste bad, so no problem for me.
The same place where Christ once wept for Jerusalem.
That is funny, considering.
In the Latter-day Saint movement, the New Jerusalem is viewed as a physical kingdom that will be built in North America, centered on Independence, Missouri. The movement refers to the New Jerusalem as Zion.
So the LDS Church thinks Jesus walked in the US. Okay.
He now plants his feet.
He planted more than his feet. He planted a whole city, and we'll get to the absurd size of that city soon. I'm assuming that this destroyed the Mount of Olives?
Indeed, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God.
But only those who kiss God's ass enough to get into heaven.
When the Apostle John was given this vision, he made sure to write down all the details. To begin, he saw the city coming down out of heaven. He saw it descending from above.
Where is John viewing all this happening from? In order for him to see the whole thing, he would have to be very far away, given the dimensions of this thing. We'll get to that soon.
To understand this literally, in light of the current scientific model, invites numerous speculations.
And why the fuck should anybody take that literally over an empirically tested scientific theory that has been proven and tested by many different fields of science that all happen to agree? No, apparently it's just better to speculate on how God's words can be right despite the evidence to the contrary.
For instance, in order for John to observe the holy city gracefully descending towards the globe, the city would have to first align itself with Earth's trajectory around the sun, travelling at a speed of 550,000 miles per hour. The city would then need to begin orbiting the Earth, slowing down as it approached the Earth's surface. All the while, its base would need to be continually adjusting to face the surface of the globe, so that John may be given the illusion of a graceful descent.
Oh, so is this John's perspective of events unfolding? As I said earlier, he would have to be very far away. So John should have known the true shape of the earth.
Despite the obvious absurdity, let's suppose that the New Jerusalem does touch down on a spinning ball. What would that look like? Firstly, John describes the city as a perfect cube. since the length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. He adds that an angel measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs, which is equivalent to approximately 1,380 miles. According to NASA, the Earth bears an average radius of 3,956 miles.
That statement alone tells me that this person has had to ignore or stay ignorant to most of the information that mankind has built upon over thousands of years. How can she not realise that knowledge of the Earth being a globe that had been proven through many different experiments has been around a lot longer than NASA has? It is not NASA that informed or shaped the fact that we live on a globe.
So if the heavenly city were to land on a globe, then the surface of that city would extend beyond the surface of the Earth. In fact, the Foursquare city would actually have a drop of 119 miles, or 191 kilometers, between its bottom corners and the surface of the Earth. To put this immense distance into perspective, the corners of the holy city would be so far off the ground that it would be equivalent to the height of 21.5 Mount Everests stacked on top of each other.
I must say here that the work you have done is very impressive. I was worried I'd have to make my own animations to show the absurdity of all this, but you're doing a great job. Please continue.
Furthermore, John described the city as having 12 gates. According to this model, the gates would be suspended at a minimum of 65 miles above the Earth's surface.
Yep, you're not getting in there. Kind of like that one and only door on the Ark that was under the waterline, but it's okay, because that was sealed by God.
Thus, if one were to exit the city via its gates, they would find themselves in the uninhabitable thermosphere in which satellites are said to orbit.
Did you notice that one? Where satellites are said to orbit, not where satellites orbit. It seems that satellites can't fit into God's truth, so to her they can't exist. Some of you might be able to see where this is heading.
To these blatant inconsistencies, some might presume that the holy city will be moulded around the Earth.
And some may know that it has to be complete bullshit, made up by people trying to explain things that they had no idea even how to begin to figure out.
However, we are plainly told that the New Jerusalem bears equilateral sides. If the city has to be curved around a spherical Earth, it will no longer have the squared dimensions of a cube. Moreover, why would God, the master architect, design a cubic structure if it was designed to sit on a sphere?
Because the God made up by people is a very confusing, childlike, narcissist idiot of an entity that can do all manner of stupid shit.
If one intends to build a structure of this magnitude on top of a ball, the walls must be perpendicular to the surface of that ball. In such a case, the walls could not be equilateral in length or have 90-degree corners. As a matter of fact, the structure would look nothing like a perfect cube. Rather, with its curved floor and curved ceiling, it would be an entirely different shape.
With the entrance still where satellites orbit and where there is no air.
Consider the gargantuan weight of a structure that is almost 1,400 miles squared. A structure made of pure gold, pearl, and precious stones. How is a globe that has been spinning on its axis concentrically for thousands of years going to handle the sudden change in eccentric imbalance? It would likely throw the Earth out of orbit and possibly even into a collision with another planet. Furthermore, if all mass is attracted to other mass by particles called gravitons, which, according to Encyclopaedia Britannica, have never been directly observed.
Yes, so why do you talk about a postulated hypothesis instead of the tested theories about gravity that we do know for sure, the things that we have observed in reality about gravity? You are starting to sound not just ignorant but also dishonest in the way you present this topic.
Then how much gravity would this colossal structure be generating? Would this not also have a bearing on the orbit of the Moon?
Exactly, given it's around 2/3 the size of the Moon, and is made of gold and gemstones. And what would that do to the tides, which are controlled by tidal forces created by the moon?
The absurdity of such a scene is perhaps the reason why Bible commentator Albert Barnes declared that the descent of the New Jerusalem city was not a literal event.
Albert Barnes seems to be using some critical thinking and logic to see the impossibility of it actually happening. Why can't you do that?
Although Barnes acknowledged that the Hebrews believed in a flat, non-rotating earth covered by a dome, he himself professed faith in the globular model.
It sounds to me as if the Hebrews at the time of writing that hadn't met the Greeks, who knew the earth was a sphere, since the earliest documented mention of the concept dates from around the 5th century BC, when it appears in the writings of Greek philosophers, not by NASA on the 29th of July 1958.
Thus, in order to maintain intellectual integrity with his position, he proclaimed, "The phrase New Jerusalem refers to the residence of the redeemed, the heavenly world. It is here represented as coming down from God out of heaven. This, of course, does not mean that this great city was literally to descend upon the earth and to occupy any one part of the renovated world, but it is a symbolical or figurative representation. The idea of a city literally descending from heaven and being set upon the earth with such proportions, 370 miles high, made of gold and with single pearls for gates and single gems for the foundations, is absurd. No man can suppose that this is literally true, and hence this must be regarded as a figurative or emblematic description. It is a representation of the heavenly state under the image of a beautiful city, of which Jerusalem was, in many respects, a natural and striking emblem." In an effort to reconcile the discrepancy between the heliocentric model and the Genesis account of creation, the Globe Believer claims that the very first page of the Bible, God's description of what He made, is figurative. And when they close the Bible, they must similarly claim that when John saw the four-square city descend out of heaven, it wasn't as he described.
Oh, Albert, you lost me. You still have to consider it to be true because God's word Bible true because it says it is and all that stuff. You've now just reinterpreted the story to soothe your cognitive dissonance.
Is it not concerning that in both Genesis and Revelation, the beginning and the end, the Globe Believer denies the obvious meaning of God's word in favour of the opinions of men?
Here we see where her own cognitive dissonance forces her to start denying reality, or what she calls the word of men, in favour of the word of ignorant people, people claiming to be speaking for an impulsive, insecure, idiotic sky wizard, which she thinks is the God-creator Big Daddy that gives a fuck about what she gets up to.
If the purpose of John's vision was simply to illustrate the beauty of what Barnes calls the heavenly state, then what was the point in the angel taking measurements of the city for John to record? What significance do the dimensions carry if the descent of the heavenly city is purely symbolic? The only solution is to deny the obvious meaning of John's vision, and yet this would negate the entire purpose and value of the second last chapter of the Bible, while inviting numerous contradictions throughout Scripture.
Of course it would, but you can't have that, can you? Time to start twisting and bending reality to make it fit God's words. God's words that came from a story, from a person, that got it from an angel, that got it from God himself. Your God also sounds lazy. Why can't he do his own work? It is his world after all. He is all-powerful, yet he can't be clear enough to even have his believers all believe the same thing. Maybe you should take over someone's body again to give us an updated version.
Let us consider the scene again, this time through the eyes of the prophet Zechariah. "Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west.
Ah, there's an answer to my earlier question about squashed olives. No squashed olives? Apparently they moved out of the way. Fuck, those olive bushes can move. If he can notice this happening, then it must be clearing that zone of 1,500 square miles in the time it takes to land. And how can he see olives that far away? How does this not look more and more like fiction the more you learn?
And there shall be a very great valley. All the land shall be turned as a plain, and it shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place.
All that soil will be moved? How long does this vision take? That soil has to be moving fast as well. Did it cover the olives, or did it go north and west?
And men shall dwell in it, and there shall be no more utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited.
There'll be no more destruction on a world that has nothing but the scars of sin. Isn't God at some stage going to cleanse it with fire? Wouldn't that destroy the scars of sin? God needs to learn how to use words.
Zechariah saw the Mount of Olives divided in two, enabling a great valley to be born in between.
That's worse. A cube would fit in a valley worse, not better.
He saw the land turned into a great plain and declared that it was there that Jerusalem was inhabited in her place.
Well, was it a plain or a valley? For fuck's sake, this is all falling apart. You're like a child trying to lie who can't remember all the previous lies that you've told.
This great plain seen by Zechariah was no doubt curveless in its topography, since it was to correspond to the flat base of the four-square city specified by John. These visions furnish further evidence that the belief in a globular, spinning, hurtling world is not at all compatible with the biblical account of creation.
Take note of that statement and see how many flat earthers say that, but without the God part.
On the contrary, when viewed alongside the testimony of Genesis 1, this false science is seen to be proudly exalting itself against the knowledge of God. Thus, it must be abandoned in order for one to truly be living by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God.
So right there is what I believe to be the birthplace of most wacky conspiracy theories. A biblical literalist will need to create or adopt all sorts of outlandish, unbelievable conspiracies in order to make what they see in reality fit a pre-shaped concept of reality. Pre-shaped concept of reality which they got from a storybook. A storybook that has no connection to reality at all except the people who made it up and continue to perpetuate the con.
And when this principle, that of humble acquiescence to God's revealed word, is followed at every question of doctrine, the result will be a people without guile in their mouths. A people who have sold all to buy the truth, and who, with joyous longing, await the day that they shall stand inside the new Jerusalem as it comes down out of heaven and rests squarely upon that level, extensive plain, the epicenter of the stationary earth.
And when that principle is followed in that way, the result is ignorant people. The result is people unwilling to let new information shape their views. The result is people unwilling to accept any information that in any way disproves the word of the Bible as being true. The result is people who have sold their intellectual integrity for a con. So in conclusion, the earth has to be flat because some guy 2,100 years ago said that he had a vision of an event that would happen in the future at some unspecified time, in which a giant cube with a flat bottom is going to land on the earth and sit perfectly. Here are some comments that were posted on this video. This is one of the best videos on the topic from a biblical perspective. What other perspective is there? With God, nothing is impossible. Yeah, all possible. I love it. I've been trying to describe this problem to people for over a year now. This visual is great help. Do you mean trying to convince people of flat Earth? This is the best one. It's an autonomous, self-sustained environment, which is the whole point. It doesn't need to fully land, nor land at all. It could hover, yet if desired, it could morph to hug the Earth. You're thinking bricks and balls, but this is divine technology. Different rules, bud. Classic. What the fuck does it need anything to do with the Earth? Does it need Earth's gravity? Is that the only thing that God can't do? So that will be the end of the video. If you have made it this far, thanks for finding me interesting enough to listen to. If you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing. I'll be trying to respond to all comments until that gets too much, if that ever happens. So if you want to chat, then down below in the comments is the place for that. Take care everyone, and keep asking questions.